Our next talk is by Ian Fisk. He'll be telling us about the new coordinating panel for software and computing.
Great. Okay. All right. Okay, so I will give the update on the coordinating panel for software and computing. And just to start with a little bit of history, the coordinating panel was a recommendation from SOMAS 2021 community study, and it was designed to be a mirror of the CPAD, which had been established about 10 years earlier, and with the purpose of promoting, coordinating, and assisting the HEP community in software and computing, and working with the existing scientific collaborations, grassroots institutes, centers, communities, funding agencies to evolve HEP software and computing needs and experiment, observation, theory, all aspects of the program. And the scope was intended to include research, development, maintenance, and user support. And then the document actually talks about further details can be found in the report. Interesting part is that the connection to CPAD was so strong that they basically actually proposed the CPAD mission as the example, even in the report. So we are intended to be a parallel organization in many ways to CPAD, though the mission is slightly different. And then in the larger context of the CompHEF, the Computing Frontier report, 4 areas were identified, and CPSC, the Coordinating Panel for Software and Computing, is intended to essentially work on all of them. So the first one was basically about long-term development, maintenance, and user support, the acknowledgement that we have a large code bases and other kinds of infrastructure that we need to figure out how to support. The examples of this were included in things like the generators, other cases of code. There was also the goal to have cross-cutting, basically R&D that went across boundaries and across projects. This is a place where computing, in theory, has a big role to play. And then the other two, the first 2 ones were primarily about technology, whether it's software or R&D. And the last 2 I generally think about are about people. So one is about supporting researchers for code reengineering, adaptation, so training to enable them to use heterogeneous resources. And then the last aspect was about career development and sustaining the workforce. So when we wrote those were essentially the structure we were supposed to work in and some of the areas that we were supposed to work on. And some history, in late 2023, a small committee was created to nominate the Foundation Task Force. I've actually left off one committee. There was a smaller committee that was chosen to choose the people to nominate the Foundation Task Force. So it's you may have heard it's turtles. I've seen the edge. It's committees all the way down. And so we had a small committee to nominate the Foundation Task Force. The Foundation Task Force was appointed and consisted of 21 members. That was done in basically around the end of the year in 2023. The Foundation Task Force had its first meeting in January of 2024, and it meets 11 times. The DPF accepts the Foundation Task Force report for the creation of the CPSC committee in October, and then nominations were collected for the actual committee itself, which is interestingly slightly smaller than the Foundation Task Force committee. And then the initial CPSC was proposed along with the chair in February of 2025, and we had our first kickoff meeting in April and has met 6 times since. So the Foundation Task Force report, which is actually on, if anyone would like to see the last version of the report, is on our founding document, is on the CPSC website, which is the link there, but it's hepcpsc.org. It's easy. The report is divided into an organization, initial areas of focus, and suggestions for how to engage the community and complete the mission. So a lot of the report is about membership and governance, how one forms the committee and how people are chosen and how long they serve. And then there is a lot of discussions about how we might facilitate communication and partnership, the kinds of problems that we'd like to work on in career development, how to develop a more inclusive workforce, and then some discussion about implementation strategies. I would say that the report is it's very ambitious. There's a lot of scope that could potentially be covered. It gives, I think, in many ways, the committee a pretty there's a lot of things that we could work on. We have chosen to start with a few just because it's not practical to try to tackle all of these things at once. But there's an option. There are a lot of things identified in the report as needing to be worked on in the community. And there are lots of suggestions. We also expected that things that are a concern of the community will evolve over the life of the panel. In reality, much like CPAD, CPSC does not have a budget, and it will likely never control resources directly. It drives activities towards communication, community engagement, training, and identifying common challenges that face the community. I think the value of the panel will be in its ability to engage with the software and computing community and be able to be a resource to inform and advise the funding agencies. Many of the proposed initial panel activities are aimed at non-technical challenges facing the community. Technical activities are likely to come from reports and assessments. I think there was a question about whether we would ever have a common fund, and that was sort of not foreseen. But at the same time, we are hoping that by being a resource that we can begin to guide people who do have funds to apply them to ways that are helpful to our community. So this is our mission statement, which is driven from the Foundation Task Force and then some work that the committee did at the very beginning. So the Coordinating Panel for Software and Computing works to strengthen the support of software and computing community that underpins high energy physics research in the United States. We are hosted inside the Division of Particulate Fields, part of the APS, and the CPSC brings together researchers, developers, institutions, industry partners to address shared challenges in computing, foster innovation, and promote collaboration across the HEP community. So we are intending to motivate support for the software and computing community to develop and operate cutting edge software and computing technologies, but this is basically to motivate support for, not to operate ourselves. Build bridges between science, academia, and industry, support training, recognition, and career development for computing professionals, and promote participation and access across the US HEP community in software computing. So we hope that by connecting expertise and ideas across disciplines, that the committee will help ensure that the HEP community is prepared to meet the computational challenges of today's experiments and tomorrow's discoveries. That's our mission. And sort of where are we now? We are still very much at the beginning. We have a website, which is hepcpsc.org, and a Slack channel on the STOMAS 21, which is also HEP-CPSC. We have a committee. This is the members of the committee listed on the website. We don't have pictures of them, but we have placeholders for pictures. Those are the people who they are and where they're from. And we have dreams and aspirations. So what are those dreams? The plans and activities. I would break our activities, our plans into two categories, and we're trying to make progress on each. One category roughly is people, so trying to figure out what are the training resources that we might have, how to improve sort of recognition by people's contributions to HEP as a field, as part of software and computing, how to improve retention, how people stay in the field, and also how to lower boundaries, the thresholds for entry, so to increase access and opportunity for people to participate in software and computing. And then on the other side is technology. So we've had some discussions about how to make formulations about best practices, how to do assessments and gaps, how to support critical common software, and how to encourage that those things are being covered, and also how to engage with industry. So to start with those, our plans for people, we were planning to have a town hall in the fall to talk about computing careers. We'd like to circulate a survey beforehand, trying to determine objective things like where people would like more training and skills, what positions and titles do they hold, what has their career trajectory been so far, so things that are relatively objective and easy to answer, but also some more subjective things, like where people feeling respected and acknowledged by their peers and the organizations they work for. Do people feel secure in their futures, and do they feel that there are paths for advancement, and what are those? And I hope that the town hall can be an opportunity to assess sort of the feelings of the community and make recommendations for actions. Similar to what is done with CPAD, we will also have an annual award or awards. We haven't decided on exactly how many. We have decided that we would like to focus, at least initially, on recognition for non-tenured people, The idea being that these awards, if they have a value, is probably to help people get their next job and stay in the field. And so we would focus on those, I think, primarily instead of sort of lifetime achievement type of awards. I think CPAD sort of offers both. We thought we would focus on the younger end, or the less stable end at the beginning. And then plans for technologies. We would also like to have and organize a town hall in the fall for technology. Again, a survey would be circulated beforehand to talk about technology directions, gaps in access and training, gaps in support, and future directions. The Snowmass report itself also identifies critical common software. Combining these two, meaning the Snowmass report and the town hall, we hope to make a report that can be submitted to the agencies, suggesting areas to invest. Because we will have to see how it goes, but I hope that our most powerful tool will be basically the ability to sort of gather requirements and engage with the community, and then communicate that to higher up. Naming, CPSC does not exactly trip off the tongue, so we're actually inviting the community to help to make a pithier name. There's a link there. You all probably have also received an email from us that sort of introduced the committee and suggested that link to propose a new name. We would appreciate it. This is a sort of a community engagement, and when we have chosen, we have got about 12 or 15 suggestions so far. Anyone who has them anymore they're more than welcome. We're not going to close the deadline yet, and then of course we will change the websites and other things. So just as an outlook, we're really just getting started. We have many promising and constructive directions, I think, ahead of us. We will actively engage with the community and serve as a platform to document and share challenges and opportunities. I hope through consistent effort, we will become a trusted resource and a conduit of information to the agencies and stakeholders for software and computing. I think that's our value. And our initial activities will include hosting town halls and producing summary reports. And we welcome input from the community to help shape our priorities. We are very much at the early stages, and we welcome people to suggest mid-course corrections if they think that we could be more effective in working some other way. And I believe that is that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Shall I go ahead and read a couple of questions that came in? One of them you may have seen in advance. It's from Kevin Pedro. It says the CPSC website currently does not mention providing support for common software projects, e.g. through a basic research needs assessment to provide foundation for additional funding for these projects from the agencies, or even directly supervising a common fund. This was one of the primary motivations during Snowmass to create the panel. What specific steps will the panel take to prioritize and address this critical need in the near future?
So two things. I think looking through the Snowmass report, the idea that CPSC itself would have funding of its own is not mentioned. I think it's not necessarily impossible, but that was not foreseen. But what was foreseen, I think, is having CPSC identify the needs and motivate someone else to do that support, and that is what we're planning to do. So the proposal is to, as part of our technology assessment, to also look at and use the Snowmass report as well for the common packages that are not being addressed or that are being sufficiently supported, and motivate that those get supported. Kevin's hand is up. He probably objects to my assessment.
Sure, Kevin, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, do we need to unmute Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on this point because I feel very strongly. And to give some background, I was one of the topical group conveners in Snowmass for theoretical calculations and simulation. Right, so this covers both generators and simulators, and this is the area where there is the biggest tragedy of the commons, probably in the entire field, but certainly in the entire field when it comes to computing. that there are very few people maintaining these software packages that everyone uses and no one contributes to them. And this is, in my mind, the overriding reason to have this panel at all. It is 90% of what this panel should be focused on. We saw the presentation from the CPAD, like they focus on putting out basic research needs and making sure that, you know, the funding agencies are aligned with what technologies need to develop. This panel needs to be doing that to the exclusion of almost anything else. A lot of the other stuff that this panel it seems to be focusing on now stems from that, right? If there is an understanding that we need to solve this tragedy of the commons, then there will be positions for people to be hired to solve it. Otherwise, we're just kind of faffing about. We're just going to say a bunch of things and no one's going to listen to it. So we have to really focus on the real core needs of the field, which is to have these common software packages supported. It's not just generators and simulators, but that's a big section. And I was just looking through this foundation formation task force panel, which despite my SNOMAS position, I was not invited to participate in or comment on. And it seems to have completely lost this and it's focused on a lot of fluff. So I'm really, really concerned that this panel is going to suck up people's time and it's not going to do the thing that it needs to do. And I would like to be reassured that that's not the case.
Okay. A lot of fluff. Okay. So I believe that we have identified the software packages. I don't know that there was the concept that the only thing that we should do is focus on the simulators. Seems like we don't need this infrastructure for that. That could be a very different effort. That it will be part of the thing that we do. It will not be the only thing that we do.
Shall we go on to another question?
Yeah, I think there was a question carried over from yesterday. Is Christoph Genzer was actually probably a similar on a similar line is that it's a long question, so maybe you can summarize. It's he mentions the P5 recommendation to ensure sustained support for widely used software packages and simulation tools. The number of people working on, for example, JHUNT4 is steadily decreasing due to lack of funding and people retiring, with a large fraction of the simulation experts, and I'd say that's more core simulation experts in US and Europe, approaching or at retirement age. Given the role of simulation tools in designing new experiments and extracting results, and their impact on systematic uncertainties, is there a possibility for the trend to be reversed, preventing loss of the expertise and potential additional cost increase due to fragmentation of experts and need for people to restore and gain the needed expertise? And I'll just comment that I think that Ian did show that this kind of effort is going to be part of what they're doing in the same way that CPAD does it. So yeah. I think the CPSC planning document was not as did not emphasize this as much as in fact Ian's talk did.
So I think the CPSC planning document has a lot of scope in it. And so I think the idea was that we tried to choose the things that we thought could be tackled at the beginning that were critical. One of them being sort of software packages, others, and then the other one that we thought was interesting to approach first was also about the field in general and how people, are people finding, why are people staying in the field and how can we encourage that to, so again, addressing addressing both issues. One is a technical one, and I think that the thing that the CPSC can do is to identify the problem and point out sort of the scope and to do a research study about what the trend has been and try to bring that to the agency as a critical resource that needs to be fixed. We don't have any money and we won't have any money to do that, and no one's going to give us any money. But what they might do is make it an initiative at the agency level if it's seen as sufficiently important. And the one thing that we can do as a committee is to speak on behalf of the community with a voice that has some, like, we will have more authority and more respectability the longer we go, but at the beginning, we can at least sort of make the claim in a focused way. And then the other aspect of this is also like making sure that their people are having supported jobs and that they feel that there is a path for them to stay, because if one of the issues we're having is that people are retiring and not being replaced, we need to understand why that is too.
Okay, and in the end, I actually had a question, which was, can you comment on synergies with the International HEP Software Foundation, the HSF?
Yeah, we were having this discussion in the committee, how we relate to the HSF. And the HSF has a slightly different mission. We think that the HSF is probably a resource for us to identify things that are common in the community that are not being supported. But again, HSF is another one of those organizations that does not have a budget of their own, and it's sort of most valuable in trying to identify packages that can be used across the community and where they are important. And so we think that the HSF is a resource for us, and that we are potentially a resource for the HSF in terms of its conduit with the agencies. But we are trying to figure out sort of what beyond that is our formal relationship, and we haven't really worked it out yet.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any
We have two
other
questions.
questions?
From
Yeah.
Axel Heubel of Berkeley
Oh.
Lab. The first from
Sorry,
him
Axel.
is, you mentioned CPSC developed a software list. Do you plan to publish that on the homepage and or make it contributable? What do we do with such a list? How do we prioritize? That's his first of two questions.
Okay. And also, just to be clear, that's not quite what I said. What I said is that the snowmass report had a list. And so we'll be using that as our start. And then how do we contribute to that list? I think that this is as part of the survey questions that we send for the technology town hall. We will be encouraging people to basically contribute to that list and make sure that there's nothing forgotten from it. And then as part of the town hall, I think we need to have a discussion as to sort of where are the most critical in terms of what's not being supported, and when we like, is there a coherent strategy that we can use with the agencies in terms of making trying to form a project?
The second question is from him. You mentioned the tight connection to detector physics via CPAD, which is great. Can you please comment on how you envision the accelerator software and computing community can be involved, and how we can connect deeply?
Okay.
In other words, making it easy to hand over particle beam distributions from accelerator and IP modeling to detector modeling, developing efficient data analysis frameworks, and so forth. How do we support and or fund that?
It's good questions both. The plan with CPAD, with CPSC, we've attempted to throughout the entire process, whether it was the Foundation Task Force to also the members of the committee, to actually try to make sure that we had a broad representation in the field across the whole place. And so I think that we don't have an infinite number of people on the committee, but so I'm sure that but we have tried to make sure that all parts of the field are represented. So we will seek nominations annually for a third of the committee members. And if people identify that there are sections that we are not been representing, people please should nominate in those areas, and we will make sure that they get on. Then in terms of how do I think the easiest way for the technical needs to be contributed, I think, would be to participate in the technical town hall in the fall, and make sure that we're looking at the entire system ecosystem together. And so that's the answer to I think the answer to the other part of the question.
I don't see any further questions.